First of all, thank you for attending. I know after this talk, I will know each and everyone's name in the audience. So thank you for attending. So today I'm going to discuss about ransomware and IoT. But before I go into the main subject, I would like to talk about my favorite subject, which is me. So that's me when I started my career. So currently I'm a principal malware scientist in RSA. And before that, I was with Trend Micro, F-Secure, and Dambala. And you can also follow me at Twitter. So if you have questions, feel free to hit me up at Twitter. If it's an easy question to answer, I'll answer immediately. If it's hard, eventually I'll answer it. And I have 2 kids. And I want them to go to college. And we all know that college is expensive. So if all of you have budget to buy books, please buy my books. So these are the 2 books I wrote: Malware Rootkits and Botnets, Advanced Malware Analysis. And I also co-authored 1 book, Hacking Exposed Malware and Rootkits. So all proceeds go to my 2 kids' 529 college fund. If you want to buy 10 pieces each, since it's Christmas, give it to all your family, please do so. If you have family that has insomnia, this would help them a lot. All right, so one thing I learned throughout my career every time I give a talk is that if I do it in a way like telling a story, people will get engaged. So I tried this on my kids. They fell asleep. So I hope it would have the reverse effect on you guys after I finish my talk. So I invented this character. I call him Sam. So one day, he got an email at work. So he was checking, and he said, you know what? This email looks very suspicious. This is what the email looks like. So if you're familiar with the emails used by attackers, this is one that is powered by Nemocod. Actually, Nemocod, if you look at it, it's like document without the T, just spelled backwards. So since Sam attended this very sophisticated, high-tech, and very expensive training, he said, you know what? This seems like a very suspicious email to me. So he said, you know, and it says here it's an invoice, but then when he opened the attachment looks something like this. So it's not a PDF file, it's not a document file, instead it's an HDA file. And instead of containing an invoice, when you open it as a text file, this is what you will see. So what is an HDA file? It's an HTML executable file introduced in 1999 along with Internet Explorer 5. I was born in 1999. Obviously, you can see from the way I look. And it's executed via mshda.exe. And so what Sam did is that he examined the HDA file very, very carefully. And this is what he saw. From here, you could actually see at the bottom of the HDA file, you see certain variables. And one of the variables there says tracks CTRA X key. So this tells us that possible characters there are the XOR key for whatever this HDA file is going to download on your machine. Now the thing about HDA files, from what I've seen so far, is that when you go to the bottom of it, there's so much juicy information, and this is just one of them. And from here, Sam was saying, you know what, I'll take note of this XOR key for later. So he did, he copied it, put it in a text file, and kept the XOR key. And he wanted to know what the HDA file does. So what he did is that it's possible that what he learned from his training, that most of these infection vectors, especially email infection vectors, they're just the first stage. After you open the attachment, it would download something on your machine. So he wants to find out what it was. So I've discovered this using trial and error. So it would seem so easy when I explain it now. but it took me weeks to actually figure it out. So, oh, not me, sorry, Sam. Sam figured it out. So, you just go at the bottom of most HDA files, and then you just copy paste or copy one of the function call there. Like on the if statement, what Sam did is that he copied one of the function calls there, and then he searched it throughout the HDA file. And then once you find it, you'll know that it's really a function call. And then in that function call, you would look at the variables that's in that function call. So why is it located at the bottom? So when I was studying before, when I was studying coding, most of the declarations, procedures that you have, it would be on top of your script. And then at the bottom would be the main program. So I just used that same concept to figure out which one of those codes would make much more sense. So once the variable is found, you just copy paste it, and then look for it, and then you'll see it at the end. So the thing about here is that Sam wanted to find out whether it's really downloading something to your system. And if it's downloading something from your system, that thing that it's downloading must be coming from a network resource outside. And most of the time, malware uses malware serving domains or malicious IPs that are hosting malware. So he found it in that variable. He found the variable, and then what he did next is he would actually look at that variable and see if that's the pointer to where the malware is or the ransomware is. Now here, it just says the variable. In some HDA files that are used by other ransomware or malware, it would have additional variables like plus variable or plus.net or plus.com or whatever. But for this one, it was just the variable. So Sam just copied that variable, and then he alerted on it. So at the bottom of the function, what he did, he just wrote alert and then put the variable enclosed in parentheses. And then he said, what I'm going to do next is that I won't run this in my production machine. I have a test machine, so I'll put it there, I'll run it there, and so he did. And this is what happened. It actually revealed the URLs where the malware or the ransomware is being hosted. So he didn't need to download the ransomware or the malware itself. He just found out which variable it was, made an alert out of it, and he's able to do this. And there's more than one, actually. When you press OK, this one came out, and this one came up. And the thing about here is that now that Sam knows the location, he could download the ransomware from there or whatever is hosted there, and then he can play around with it. And when he did that, he realized that it's not really an executable file. It's just a bunch of garbled data. It's not even binary. But then Sam remembered, you know what, I have an XOR key from the HDA file that I extracted. So he did an XOR, and lo and behold, it was an executable file, and it turned out to be a ransomware malware. So attackers, what they do is that they put on their malware serving domains encrypted malware or encrypted ransomware, so that if somebody finds out about their malware serving domain, if researchers download those files, it would be hard for the researchers to reverse it because number one, they need to decrypt it first. And without the key, it would be hard for researchers to decrypt it. But if you have the key on the infection vector, which is in the HDA file, it'll be easy for you to do that. And the thing about the HDA file I showed before, or that Sam looked at, it's easy to see those variables. You see X key. It's like you have a bunch of random characters and then a specific variable name like X key or X something. It's just like what the attackers are doing. they still have markers for certain variables. But then after I wrote a blog about this, after a couple of days or a couple of weeks, what happens is that it disappeared. It's just random variables. So more time for trial and error. And what they do here is that most HDA files that I've seen so far is that it's constructed the same way. It's just the variables are different. So it's just like when you're in college, you have a coding assignment, and then you don't have any time to do it because you went out partying the night before. So you have to submit something. So you ask your friends, hey, can you send me your code? I'll make sure I change the variables so our professor won't even notice. That's why when copy-paste was invented in Word, not WordStar, it was really, really very helpful for people like not myself, that copy code from your classmates and then you just change the variable. And then you ended up having higher grades than the original script because you were able to name your variables in a very complicated way. So Sam was so curious, he said, you know what? I'll let this run and see what happens in the host. So what happens in the host is what's expected. So it downloads the encrypted file and put it in the temp folder. And then after that happens, it decrypts it, writes it to a DLL and an executable file, an exe file. And he realized, yeah, it's how I expected it to be. And the thing about here is that most of the malware that are downloaded are put in a temp folder first and not in their proper location because decryption has to happen first. So I wrote a blog about it, how decryption happens using the XOR key in an HDA file. So he was so happy and he said, you know what? This is so easy. Lots of people got infected with this and I was able to solve it. And I think my boss would be happy that the SANS training that he had me go to is well worth it. Because I'm able to figure this out, I'm able to provide information to my colleagues and even to our SOC. So he was so happy. And Sam, being a millennial like me, whatever he did didn't happen unless he posted it in social media, right? So he has to post it in social media. So he did. So he logged into his FB account and saw a message from one of his friends. By the way, this is this part of my presentation. This research was not done by me. It was done by Bart Blaze. He was the one who discovered this attack. So Sam logged into his Facebook page and he saw this. Like his friend sent him a file and then he opened the file, and this is what he saw. So it brought him to a fake YouTube page and asking him to download an extension. So when you look at the extension, it just says this. And of course, for us that are in the security field, it's already a red flag saying, you know what, this doesn't seem legitimate. Even the URL of YouTube is not youtube.com, it's something else. So what he did is that before doing anything else here, he said, I'll examine this SVG file that my friend sent to me. So he did, and he found out that SVG file stands for Scalable Vector Graphics, also introduced in 1999. And the thing about here is that you can actually embed JavaScript in it. So what he did, he opened it in his test machine, and he saw a red dot. So the photo is a red dot. So I'm just guessing here, but if you have a red dot on you, it means you're a target, right? So it's just like saying you've just been marked, you're a target, you got this red dot SVG file. And what he did after that, when he found out that it's a red dot, you see, let's look at the code embedded in that SVG file. So he saw this, and then he followed the same principle as he did in the HDA file, he looked at the variables, and then he alerted on them. So one thing here that we can say is that no matter what platform the attackers use for their infection vector, if they use the same script, chances are how it's constructed, it's going to be the same way. So if something worked, so if you find out something that works for one, always try it out on the next one. If it doesn't work, then you do more trial and error, and then more analysis of the script. But if it works, it'll save you a lot of time. So he alerted on one of the variables, and then this is what came up. And he found out that, yeah, it's not legitimate. The one that was being downloaded, extension, is actually another stage of malware infection wherein it would download something to your system and get you infected. So he was so happy. Yeah, you know what? These are all easy. So Sam was so happy, so he went on his merry way. But wait, there's more. So RIP to this guy, if you guys know him. So Sam got a snail mail from grandma. And Sam, he loves his grandma. Because most of the time, his parents would say no to him, but then the grandma would always, yeah, let's buy it. Oh, you need an Xbox One S? Yeah, sure, we'll buy it. So what Sam did, he said, you know what, grandma needs help. I have time to go to grandma. So he did. And when he went to grandma's house, this is what he saw on grandma's desktop. So it's a server infection. So the thing about ransomware is that ransomware announces itself. So like server variants, it would even play a file that says your machine is infected, all of your documents are locked. So it will really announce itself. And it would change your desktop wallpaper. And then it would also have files on your machines that when you click on it, it would help you out how to pay them. So one thing that Sam saw was an HDA file. So the HDA file actually helps the user reach out to the attacker so that they can pay them. And one thing about here is that if one of the domains don't work anymore, you can regenerate it. And then it'll give you a new set of domains, and then you can pay the attackers that way. So he looked down, and then he said, you know what, this is a really good README file if we want to recover our files. And one thing that actually you could see here is that it says, don't worry, this HDA file is not malware. It's not malicious in any way. It's just here to help you out, to be able to contact us to pay for us. Of course, Sam already has experience with HDA files, so he was a little bit worried about this. So Sam realized that, you know what, I looked at it, there's really nothing wrong with the code, so let's follow what the HDA file is saying. So it led them to this server decryptor. And the thing about this is that even though it's a ransomware company, they're very keen on making sure that whoever is talking with them or accessing their website is human. So they want to make sure they're also practicing some sort of security, saying, you know what, we don't want any bots going to our website and playing around. We want you to prove that you're human. And they also have like a special price for a limited time. So it's just like saying, you know what, if you pay us now, you'll save a lot of money instead of paying us later. And the thing about here is that if you want to be a successful company, aside from providing discounts, it's also good to have a really reliable tech support. So if ever you get victimized, I won't tell you what happened, but try this out on your machine and compare it to the tech support compared to your cable tech support or your mobile cell phone tech support. Try it out. You'll be surprised about how they do customer service. So instead of you waiting like half an hour to an hour talking to a real person, or chatting with somebody from your cable company, they're actually really, really quick. And also, most successful businesses, they would also let you try before you buy. It's just like a drug. Right? Here, have a taste. And then if it works, you can pay me more, and then I'll provide the same service to you. So the thing about here is that it gives you the chance to try it, but only one file. So if you have like millions of files in your machine and got encrypted, and you only need one file, you're lucky because you could just decrypt it for free. Which is what happened to Grandma. Because Grandma actually only has one file on her machine. She only has one picture in her machine. So how many of us visited our grandparents' house, and then you go there, you open the door, you see tons of pictures on the fireplace mantle, tons of pictures on the stairs going up to their bedroom, tons of pictures on the walls. So it's the same thing in Grandma's house. Most of the pictures are printed, except for this one, which is on her desktop. So Sam was saying, you know what, Grandma, we're good. We'll just decrypt this one file. You don't need to pay them in Bitcoins. Anyway, Grandma was saying, what are Bitcoins anyway? So the thing about most of the ransomware right now that are asking for Bitcoins, if the victims are actually non-technical people, they'll have a hard time understanding what a Bitcoin is. But if it's most of those browser lockers that came before ransomware came back again, which would ask them, you know what, just go to Walmart or go to MoneyGram or Western Union, send this money, or just buy tons of gift cards, give me the numbers, and you'll be good to go. So it's just like a layer of protection. This is just my opinion. If your non-technical relatives become victims of this, they would have a hard time paying because they won't understand what a Bitcoin is. But if attackers would ask them for gift cards that they have easy access to, then that's more worrisome because they could just go to Walmart, buy them, and pay them immediately. So they did. They test one file. They uploaded it. It's being decrypted. And then once it's done, you can download it as a zip file. And the thing about here is that when it decrypts something, it's just like nothing happened, including all of the metadata. There's no modified anything. Everything is just as it was. So if you're a traveling business person and you got infected with this, and you don't want your company to know that you got infected, or because you might get fired, so some of them, they'll just pay. Anyway, what's, let's say $300 compared to the risk of being fired anyway. But of course, I'm not saying you do that. So if something happens, always contact your security personnel in your company, especially that we're being recorded. That's what I'm suggesting. So once you download it, what Sam did is that he opened it and said, you know what, this is it, we're good. We're good to go, we didn't need to pay for anything, and we were able to recover that one picture. So when you actually test Cerber, this is what you will see, at least for this specific version of Cerber. So like for me, I have dummy files on my test machine. This is one of my dummy files. It pretends to be a picture file, but in fact, it's just like AAA. There's nothing on it. And you'll see it would start on the 640th position. That's when it starts to decrypt the picture file. And once it got decrypted, it just came back to its original form. So if you're going to test something, if you have a test machine, if you like to tinker with malware, it's also good to have like dummy files or bait files in your machine in different locations. Especially if you're dealing with information stealers. It's always good to have like fake sales reports, customer lists in your documents folder. And also your browser should have activities or cookies that, let's say, visiting websites that have interest when it comes to sales or profits or business. So Sam was saying, Grandma, I'm just curious, what's this one picture that you have in your machine that you don't want to put on your wall? So they opened it, and this is what they saw. So they love to take pictures with their pussy cat, grandma and grandpa. So, and words of advice. Like for us, this is common sense. But if, like for me, if I talk to my non-technical relatives, I have to remind them over and over again. And for me, every time I visit them, it's good for me because I get to see new malware on their system. So if you need to find out new malware, you don't need to join research mailing lists, or you don't need to pay for it, or you don't need to have access to certain websites that have malware in them that you can download. Just go to your non-technical relative's house and go to their PC, and you'll find tons of them. And it's live. So you get to see real-time network communication coming from the malware, going to the malware serving domain, or to whatever CNC they're using. So some words of advice. Don't just click on anything. If it's too good to be true, chances are it's not. So how many of you guys got a text message from your aunt or uncle saying, hey, you know what, that trip you're planning to Hawaii, don't worry about it, I'll pay for it. I just met this Nigerian prince, and I gave him $5,000, and I'm just waiting for $500,000 to be wired to my account. So don't worry about that trip. So it sounds funny to us, but in fact, there's so many people that are getting victimized because of this. And especially now that phishing is becoming popular again. Lots of old people are getting victimized by IRS scams, where you would get a call from the IRS and saying, hey, you haven't paid your taxes, for this to go away, just buy a gift card from this store, and then call this number and then provide this. There's actually this guy, I saw it in one of the social medias, wherein he actually talked to one of these IRS scammers. I forgot, but just Google it, you'll see it. It's a very interesting video, the way he talked to them. And backup regularly. Like for me, I have an offline backup, and I also have online storage. So especially when it comes to pictures. If you have kids, you know what I'm talking about. Those pictures, videos are priceless. So just pay for $50 worth of online backup for a year and do offline backup, and you'll be golden. So Sam was saying, you know what? I solved problems in my work. I was able to help grandma. And he said, you know what? It's late. I need to go home. I need to sleep. Anyway, my girlfriend is just coming off from her night shift. So he decided to just go home to Netflix and chill with his girlfriend. But then, of course, you cannot chill without watching Netflix first. So what he did is he tried to log into his Netflix. But then Sam got frustrated. He said, how can we chill without Netflix? My Netflix is not working. It's unreachable. So he said, you know what? Let's forget Netflix. Let's just listen to music. Let's go to SoundCloud. But still, it's not working. And then he said, I know I paid for all my services. So he logged into his PayPal account, and then he said, I also can't reach my PayPal. So he was so mad, and he said, I'm going to complain about this. So he tried to log into his Twitter account, but then his Twitter account was also unreachable. And then he realized throughout the day that there was a DDoS attack going on. And it was caused by a Mirai botnet. By the way, a credit to the image from HackRead. They did this image. I just captured it from their website. It's cool, right? I wish I could have thought about this. So, what is Mirai? So it's a malware that infects IoT devices and for the purpose of using them for DDoS attacks. But of course, once you're in an IoT device, you can do whatever you like from there, not just use it for DDoS attacks. And it spreads by scanning IP addresses. And when it comes to scanning IP addresses, it actually excludes IP ranges from this company. Now, I'm not so sure why, but I could understand they don't want to scan DoD's IP addresses because it might cause a red flag and they might investigate them. But I'm not so sure why other companies have been excluded. And it uses a remote CNC to determine its DDoS target. So the thing about Mirai is that the code is already public, so it actually saved me time on reversing it. So every time a code becomes public, it's a double-edged sword because number one, it helps us researchers. It saves us time. Instead of reversing it, you have the code there in English and you could already understand it. But then, of course, attackers can take it, modify it, make it better, and then release something much more complicated and even much more dangerous than the previous generation. So this is the IP address exception list. So if I was an attacker and I want to modify this, I could just change some of the fields there, add more IP addresses, or remove some of the IP addresses. So how does the attack work? So once it finds vulnerable IoT devices, it brute forces its way into accessing it via a list of common used passwords. So I remember before, when I was younger, there was this movie called Hackers. I think it was 97, 98. And the guy there, what was his name? Fisher Stevens, if you guys remember him. So in that movie, he said, I created a memo about common use passwords. And if I remember correctly, there were only 3 common used passwords during that time. One was God, sex, I forgot the other one. And just a side note about Fisher Stevens, he actually fooled me. So one of my favorite movies is Short Circuit. So in Short Circuit, he played an Indian guy there. So when I first saw him, I thought he was a legitimate Indian guy. And then when I saw him in Hackers, he wasn't. So that tells me that he's a really good actor. He could play different roles, not only different roles, but also different nationalities. And once it infects an IT device, it makes sure that nobody can communicate with it. So it's just like saying, I'm in, I'll lock all the doors so nobody can come in. And if something is there, for this one, it's specifically targeting anime, it removes it, which is good for us because the code to remove anime is already available. So you don't need to come up with a solution, you just use that code. And if you have an IoT device that's infected by anime, you could just use that code to remove anime. So before there were only 3 common passwords that are being used, and these are some of, now there's lots of them, and you could actually add more. So as a good practice, if you're using any of these passwords in your IoT devices, then it's time to change them. So as I've said earlier, Mirai source code is public. So it's released by Senpai, Anna Senpai. So I think they have some sort of fascination with Japanese culture. Mirai is Japanese, and Senpai is also Japanese for upperclassmen. So if you're into martial arts, if somebody's called Senpai, is considered an upperclassman. I think second only to Sensei. So Sensei, if you're able to teach and you pass all of the requirements, then you become a Sensei. And so somebody took that code and then attacked Dyn. So what is Dyn? So it's headquartered in New Hampshire. It's an internet infrastructure company. So the first wave started at 7 a.m. second wave around noon, third wave around 4 p.m. And Dyn was the one, because of most of the services that utilized Dyn, they were affected and they were not reachable during this time, 7 a.m., noon, and 4 p.m. So they were flooded by requests from millions of IP addresses. So for example, if your IoT device needs to check in to their legitimate location or destination, instead of doing that, they were actually flooding Dyn with requests. So just like a typical DDoS attack, they were down from 7 a.m., noon, and then 4 p.m. So actually DDoS, it's a very fun thing to do. But since we're being recorded, don't do it. So if you guys remember Windows NT, NT Workstation, if you want to mess up one of your office mates, you just open a command line. I think the command is net send, and then to that person's machine. And then just do it on a loop, and then it will continue to send that message. And that person won't be able to use his workstation, because that message would pop up all the time, and then he'll just end up pressing OK, 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 and OK. I'm just sharing that story because my friends used to do that, and I find it so funny every time I discuss about DDoS. So Mirai timeline. So September 20, Krebs' website was DDoSed, and Mirai source code was leaked. Dyn was DDoSed 20 days after. So I'm just guessing. I'm not so sure if this really happened, but I'm just guessing. Probably somebody took that code. They had like 2.5 weeks to modify it, and then they use it to DDoS Dyn. And then a month after that, Oracle bought Dyn. So if you get DDoS, chances are you'll get bought, and if you're an employee of that company, your stocks in that company would soar. So there's no such thing as bad breach, right? That's just a joke, by the way, if you're watching this. And Krebs identified the alleged Mirai author. That was January 17, 2017. So securing your IoT devices. So like for me, I travel a lot. I speak at different conferences. So it's good to have, to see your house using your cameras and all, see your kids, see your pets. And I too, sometimes, I'm too lazy in changing my passwords. I just want it to work. And I always say, nobody would be interested. But then, of course, if you really think about it, you're opening yourself up to being breached. If you guys are familiar with Shodan, you could actually find devices on the net that are vulnerable. So if you're not, after this talk, just Google Shodan. And I think they still offer free services. So change default username and password. So if you only need to access it using one device, just make sure it's only that device that can access it. And US CERT came up with this advisory. So I won't read them all, but you can find them once I share my slide after this talk. So it's all there. Like for me, I really don't like reading from presentations. Because when I was a student, when my professors read something like that, I just end up sleeping anyway. So Sam realized that, you know what, I haven't been doing this. So I'm probably also to blame. That's why I wasn't able to Netflix and chill. So he told his girlfriend, you know what, let me do this. So he said, you know what, we need to change our device passwords before it's too late. And this is what he realized. Again, this is from Joy of Tech. Really nice website if you want some funny stuff about what we're doing today. And Sam realized this is going to be a very, very long day. That was taken in the last conference that I presented this talk in. So. Oh, I see. So I don't have a figure of how many of the IoT devices that have been compromised were compromised by using by brute forcing, using passwords, or using vulnerabilities. So right now I don't have that figure. But if I'm going to guess, based on the codes that I've been seeing so far, most of them are being compromised using passwords. But I don't have the exact figure. All right, if there are no more, thank you very much for coming, guys. Thank you.